right, we're talking about the unseen on Kill by Kill. Well, greetings and salutations, Internet. It's your old pal, Patrick Hamilton, coming to you once again from Solvang, home of the fantastic pancake and beer combination. This is the Kill by Kill podcast, where we are dedicated to celebrating the least discussed component of any horror film, the characters. We're going to unpack all the goriest of details of 1980's The Unseen in the hopes that a TV crew's untimely end is just the beginning of the jokes we might make at their expense. And as always, there's only one person I trust, that if I want to get across to her that she's never going to play football again, we'll at least do it in front of a bunch of 9-year-olds playing football. The one, the only, Gina Radcliffe. How are you doing today, Gina?
I am good. I've got my Solvang Danish Days t-shirt on.
Yes, it's huge.
Very excited.
Very excited. I was in Solvang for their Christmas parade this year, and it was pretty much the exact same thing. Luckily, I had booked a hotel room in advance. But other than that, it was the exact same journey that these women are on. I ended up trapped in a basement with the unseen, and I escaped just mud covered at the end of it.
And your estranged boyfriend showed up, fell down, did absolutely nothing to save your life.
Yes. I think one of the best moments in the movie, honestly, is that you think it's just prototypical that he would save the day, but Chekhov's knee gets in the way. But wait, we'll get to it. Don't worry, folks. But before, I don't want to frighten you, Gina, but we are not alone. That's right. We have a special guest. Now, of course, you know him as the preeminent James Bond watch expert of America, and of course, as the editor-in-chief of some horror magazine called, Fangoria. Of course, he is a returning champion here at Kill by Kill, the one, the only Phil Nobile Jr. How are you doing today, Phil?
Patrick, thank you for having me back, and thanks for giving this movie its time in the sun. You know, I'm an evangelist. I'm an advocate. I like to bang the drum.
Yeah.
And you're doing it. This is the first podcast I've ever heard that's going to give an hour to the unseen. And for that, you, sir, and Gina are trailblazers.
That's right. To an audience hungry for unseen content, finally, they will have their moment in the sun. We're going to talk about it all. So, Phil, this is a question I do very much want to ask you as the sort of preacher on the mount, as it were, of the unseen.
Yes.
What was your first exposure to this movie?
Friends, have you heard the good news? My unseen origin story is girthy. No, it's here's the deal. My older sister's husband, and by say older, she was 8 years older than me. So this guy was like maybe all of 23 when I was 12 or whatever, whenever I was when I saw this thing.
But he was a man in the world.
He was a man,
and
I was staying over, and he said, "Oh," and they had cable. And so, like when I was a kid, I didn't have cable. When you stayed over somebody's house with cable, very cool, very exciting. Sure. What's on cable? And and he goes, "Oh, The Unseen is on tonight on the movie channel. You have to watch The Unseen." And I was like, "Okay, yes, I do." And I watched it, and it left a mark on me.
Sure.
As we'll get into, this movie is singing a song that no other movie is singing, I think. Yeah. It's a slasher, but it's so much more, and it's so much else. And it just burned itself into my brain so much so that, like, I go ahead another 10 years forward. I've been trying to find it on VHS as a 22-year-old. Yeah. And I pull into a West Coast video and I find it, and it's for rental. And I say, "Hey, this is just a catalog title. It's beat to hell. The box is falling apart. Can I buy this?" "No, we can't do that." Uh-huh. And so this is a West Coast video. They're gone now. So I'm safe in telling you that I stole that tape. I stole that tape. I will send you a picture of it if you want, because I still have that tape. It was like a weird white whale for me through a lot of my teen years, because it played on Movie Channel and then I never could find it. So when I found this tape, I just, I surrendered to my impulse. And then I would show that tape to anybody that I could get to sit down and watch it. And, jump forward to this golden age of digital restoration. And it's on DVD and it's on Blu-ray. and I kind of can't believe that, 12-year-old me wouldn't have imagined that I had some platform called Birth Movies Death once upon a time where I could just write at length about this movie and try to evangelize for it. But we are here. We're here in the present where we can like recognize the film. And I saw some other horror writers online complain that this is an offensive movie. And it is.
Yeah.
It's problematic. It's offensive. It's not a sensitive movie in terms of portraying certain maladies. Mm-hmm. But the movie exists, and we are but archaeologists. There's no point in pretending the movie doesn't exist. We can talk about this thing. We are not putting money in the pockets of bad people by talking about this film.
Yeah, it had its moment in the sun. I don't know that any money that's going back to it is really funding anyone who's, I don't know. It's a complicated history with this motion picture, and because it also ties back to another one of the movies that you hold dear to yourself, because the original writers of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre were also involved at the story level.
That's the story, yeah. Kim Henkel apparently had an uncredited story pass on this. I don't know why it would take. I mean, there's 3 people credited on screen with the story, and then if you throw Kim Henkel on top of that, I don't know why this took 4 people, but it's that's the rumor. But the other 2 are makeup effects artists, Stan Winston and Tom Berman. Now, Stan Winston, everyone knows, is the guy who did like the Iron Man suit and Aliens, and Pumpkinhead was his directorial debut. But he apparently had a story credit on this along with Tom Berman, who came from like I believe a dynasty of makeup artists, and he was like the guy who did the Paul Schrader Cat People and a lot of creature stuff in the 80s.
Yeah, he was big. He was a big latex jockey, there's. The way I understand it, from the way Berman tells it, is that Hinkle had written a story that was the basic, I don't know, the train tracks, that you have this mother, father, and this child in which they are raising in a cave and throwing raw meat to. Mm-hmm. And he meets with them and says, I don't think this is a real story. I don't know that there's a lot of here.
Yeah.
And they threw up their hands and said, well, I don't know what to do with this either. And they all walk away. And some producer goes, I've got some money sunk in this, and I've someone is willing to pay for their son to direct it. So will you please just like make a movie out of it? And he creates a set of characters, and it's kind of a gothic thing, and he changes it a little bit from the Texas Chainsaw, finding someplace in the middle of nowhere you're not supposed to be, into a Psycho-like tale with the structure of what you would become a slasher, but it's made so early. There's not a lot of slasher tropes to it necessarily.
Right. Yeah.
And then you get the one, the only, Danny Steinman as director. And I'm not telling tales out of school, because I've said this online before. This is far and away Danny Steinman's best movie.
I wouldn't argue with that.
I don't think it's his best third act, because you also have Savage Street. But when you compare it to the way it looks, the way it moves, the way it acts, the way some of these characters approach actual human beings, and it is a legitimate actor's piece.
Yes.
Where you have real actors being given interesting things to do, and they're trying to make the most of it, baby. It's a trier. Yeah. That's what this kind of matches up for me.
Oh yeah. This the actress playing the wife, Leela Goldoni, she's just like, she's playing to the back of the theater. She's just really giving this 200%.
Yes.
Yeah. And she was in Cassavetes' first film.
Yeah.
Shadows. Yeah. And Sidney Lassick was in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And Stephen Furst was no slouch, although his credits weren't as deep. But I think that's the special sauce of this movie is this weird friction between like this ultimate professionalism of this cast and this really just porn scuzzy DNA of like the creative team.
Yeah.
You know, it's something about that mix just creates it's just so special to me.
It's photographed really well.
It's a nice looking film. Mm-hmm.
It's a nice looking film. It's Steinman's best looking movie by a country mile. It's got this weird sort of 70s haze to it. This The sort of mist that sort of is in a lot of Columbo episodes that make that so comforting to watch is in this. And also, it's sleazy as fuck. So it's also inherently Steinman-esque.
Yes.
Because he comes from a background of porn, whether it was hard or soft. People are a little iffy about it one way or the other.
Right.
But that was his filmmaking background. And then he comes into this, and he's also horned his way into the writing process at some point. I don't know what his contribution is, because a lot of people didn't enjoy working with him based on the interviews that I've read.
Right.
And seen. So, hey, listen, not everyone's easy to work with. Also, you don't need to be an asshole. But that being said, he gets a bunch of money from his dad and says, I'm going to make this movie. And it seems to be right time, right place. And there's a weird conflation of elements with another movie we kind of covered a little bit here on the show, Gina. And it's a little ditty called Friday the 13th.
Right.
When it comes to a certain point, you just feel it's 1980, but everyone's making a 70s movie. That's really the gloss, the threads that go all the way through it. And on top of it, you just like Sidney Lassick in this movie is every muscle when he went home for the day near his eyes must have been aching, because every part of his face is twitching like living hell throughout the entire thing. He's giving everything to every moment of this movie.
Yeah, I like the comparison to Psycho. I think that's really present here. Phil, was it in your, because I reread I had read your article before and I reread it after watching the movie the other day. Was it, it was yours that mentioned that his character looks more like how Norman Bates is described in the book? That's correct. Yeah. Right. That really stuck with me and made a lot of sense.
Yeah. And there's so much Psycho DNA in there. You know, there's a corpse that's being conversed with, a parental corpse. There's the peephole moment. There's the sort of a fete innkeeper who's got a secret and you're not sure what it is. And it's just, I don't know how much of that was intentional. Do you know what I mean? Because in 1980, it's not like you're popping into the video store and you've got Psycho memorized, but there's just some kind of weird bleed happening there that I think is again part of what makes it so fun, is that it borrows sort of this classy structure of Psycho in service of a pretty skeezy twist or reveal. Yeah, you know, because again, that's the other thing that has shared with Psycho is the giant twist in the third act, right?
Exactly. And the first time I saw this, I had read your article to a certain point, but I didn't know where things were happening. And I had seen at some point the scene in which the first girl who's killed is dragged into an air grate.
Yeah.
And this is after she's been peeped on in a bathtub. And then it's kind of this reversal of the shower sequence where, she's out of the bathroom. Right. So now I think she's safe, because in Psycho, you would be killed in the bathroom. But then she comes to an air grate, this other thing that's in everyone's house that you don't think you would be killed near. And no, you get dragged into it. And then I think it just fused in my mind with my afternoon 70s viewing of Are You Afraid of the Dark? Or Don't Be Afraid of the Dark?
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Yeah, Kim Darby.
Don't Be Afraid of the Dark. Which I saw while on vacation on Balboa Island on a tiny television. And it scared me to the point where there was me before and there was me after watching that movie, especially the ending, which, not to give anything away, someone gets dragged into a grate, this time in a fireplace. And
it's funny, Patrick, is when I was watching this the other day, and I had to watch. It is very hard to find currently, and I had to watch it on Daily Motion. So it was interrupted about every 2 minutes or so by commercials for a rehab center, which kind of added to the overall holy shit experience of watching this.
Yeah.
But I had pretty much the same experience as you did, that with the scene where she is dragged into the grate, I'm like, wait a minute, I've seen this.
Yeah.
But everything that came after that, I'm like, oh wait, no, I've not seen this, or I blocked it out, or I only saw that one part. So yeah, I had the exact same experience you did.
And you people at home might think, well, I'm getting a sense for what this movie is, but you can cruise through this first hour and go, well, I don't know what's necessarily special about this. And then you hit that third act and it's a whole other fucking movie.
Yeah.
And I think he tried to do this, and it kind of works better in Savage Streets. And then it doesn't work at all in Friday the 13th, Part 5. Sorry, Part 5 apologists. That's just my opinion. But this is the movie where I think while he didn't agree with whatever was happening, because he had his name taken off the movie.
Right.
But ultimately, it's fucking successful at what it's attempting to do.
And, you have to wonder if is it a death of the author kind of thing? Because can something go that off the rails in the third act and be completely on purpose? Did they really, really mean to get it just the way they got it? Because there's the wrongness of the third act, I think, is what makes it magic for me. And I don't know that Steinman had the skill set to the painter's brushes to execute that in the nuanced way that it happened. Mm-hmm. But I also don't want to take away his credit if it's something that he did. But to me, it seems almost unplannable. Some of that energy seems impossible to orchestrate.
I would agree with you. It's kind of that happy accident sort of deal. I would almost conflate it a little bit, going again to this sort of everyone's trying to get a horror movie out in this era, and they can't all be watching each other's. Like, they're all kind of, some of them are making them at the same time.
Yeah.
But you have Just Before Dawn, which also has this very slasher-esque, very, although it's a bit more like Deliverance in a lot of ways. And then it gets to this third act in which our final girl, and spoilers for Just Before Dawn, but there's no other way to put this. She shoves her entire forearm down a guy's throat. And it's so audacious. It's so outrageous that from that moment on, it kind of reaches a pinnacle. It does the thing that only exploitation motion pictures can really do, which is shock you out of your normal cinematic mode of kind of being comfortable in the skin of the movie and just going, no, I'm trying to be memorable. Thank you very much. And doing the most outrageous fucking thing you can see. And sometimes it works. And I feel like with The Unseen, it's so wrong, it's right.
Yeah. And in 2022, not to get on a soapbox, that feels almost endangered. We don't get that very much now.
Yeah, I was going to say, I described this to Patrick earlier as it's a true, you couldn't make this now, that's actually genuinely good.
Yeah. And because this is a side thing, maybe not the place for it, but horror is becoming this macaroni and cheese comfort food where people go because it's their happy place and it's their safe place, and they're going to go watch their 80s favorites and identify with the final girl and be empowered. But this is a ragged ride that is not there to make you feel better about anything.
Yes.
Right.
And I think I have a hunch we're maybe going to turn back in that direction sooner than later, because the empowering, comforting horror shit is starting to kind of wear thin.
I think in a certain way, when you look back too much, and listen, I hate to break it to everybody, but Kill by Kill is kind of like the old man's movie report. We've always kind of been backwards looking.
Sure.
But our main goal originally was to like look at a very vaunted and enjoyable series and look, just try to understand it piece by piece and see if they still held together. And it, you know, we had a lot of fun jokes to make about it all. But I feel like there's a push and a pull where to make this, you have to push beyond the bounds of good taste. But it's also artfully done enough that it counterbalances that with a certain amount of skill.
Yeah.
And for a long time, there was that Trauma-esque thing of just push it beyond taste to the point where we create our own level of taste. And while that's not my thing, at least it was a chosen aesthetic. And now people are, I think, a little bit warped by cinema score and kind of what we do, which is picking apart movies, not because we feel they're wrong in that circumstance, but simply going, what was the motivation for this character to do this
like
one thing?
Over analyzing stuff that doesn't really need to be over analyzed.
Exactly. And we do it for fun here.
Right.
And I think other people view that as legitimate criticism, whereas I think ultimately what it comes down to, and our feelings about this is that it might not be the greatest movie in the world, but there's greatness within this movie because of what it attempts to do and how everyone's trying to do it. And I don't know, people get a little cinema score about it all.
Yeah.
Where if it jars them out of their normal wavelength, you can immediately view it as, well, this is all trash. Whereas for the first 15, 20 minutes of Halloween Kills, I'm like, am I falling in love? Am I going to marry this movie? And I still hold on to that. Like, I like that portion of the movie was absolutely great to me.
Yeah.
It lost me later on, but there are worse sins.
Sure.
And I think people are getting a little too fucking precious, a little too binary about movies instead of, you know, and following in the great Gina Radcliffe tradition of it's fine.
Binary is a great word for it. And you know, something that I think about all the time in Oscar season, which we're in now, is that is the best acting, editing, cinematography, music, directing all in the same 10 movies? You know, isn't there a great performance in a kind of a piece of shit somewhere? Isn't there like great cinematography in a movie that didn't come together? The way that it calcifies into like a handful of favorites, like senior superlatives, is frustrating to me. There's so much, like you said, greatness in movies that are not 100% successful. And I wish that we could sort of break out of the Rotten Tomatoes of it all to kind of get, you know, into the things that are worth discussing and picking apart, even in the films that aren't, you know, quote unquote, great films.
Well, everything that, you know, what you both are saying, it makes, you know, so much sense. It can be summed up in when Patrick mentioned wanting to do this movie. And, you know, I listen, I think I had seen it before, but I'd also read the Birth Movies Death article. And I'm thinking, are you sure you want to cover that? Are you really sure? Because I feel like that we fall still far enough, and we do pretty good ratings wise, but I still think we fall far enough under the radar that I don't think we're going to get any you know, any pushback for featuring this movie, and without, you know, heavily saying, well, this is terrible and they shouldn't have done this, and, you know, saying anything beyond, you know, well, the third act is offensive and yet the movie kind of works overall for what it's trying to do.
Right.
So, you know, yeah, I was thinking, it's like, is this going to be a problem for us?
No, because, you know, the people can only get mad about things they already know about. It feels like these days, you know, for someone to get mad at you about this movie, they've got to listen to this podcast, then go chase down this movie, and then go watch it, and then come at you. And I think that number is probably less than 3.
Which really bodes well for how this is going to go over.
You know, I mean, maybe there. I think you've just got fans who like to hear what you have to say about stuff. But I think that if you picked a movie that was already problematic, that already had a big reputation, then you're going to get the drive-by comments and whatnot. But this is a bit of a deep dive, still in all, no matter how many times Code Red puts it out on DVD. This is not going to be a mainstream hit with anyone. Shudder's probably not running this one anytime soon.
Yeah.
But if we get 10 people to watch it, then I think that's cool.
Yeah. I wish this was on a place like Tubi, which is kind of a weird repository for things that kind of fall through the cracks.
The gray market. Yeah.
Yeah, as it were. Because like Mikey, another insanely problematic motion picture, but it turned out like there was this weird well of people who had caught Mikey at some point.
Yeah.
Who all tuned into that particular episode. It did very well. And to me, this has those elements of, yeah, it's wrong, but it's also never purporting to be reality. It never goes so far as to say, this is a reflection of life. It's like, here's this crazy fucking idea.
Yeah.
And we're just going to commit to it. We're all going to commit to it. And I think if you tried this 100 times, 99 of them would not work. And there are plenty of people who are going to find this movie and go, that doesn't work for me. But you'll come out the other side appreciating all the effort it went into to try to make it work for you.
Right.
So let us discuss the unseen in sort of closer detail as we are oft wont to do here. And of course, that starts with decorating. We love decorating on Kill by Kill. It tells us so much about the person who lives inside that domicile. And so my first question is, who fucking decorated this apartment with a statue of a homunculi?
Well, isn't that foreshadowing? Isn't that essentially like Junior eventually?
I think it is meant to be Junior, but also the rest of the apartment seems to be a mix of badly sculpted Heisman trophies, an Emmy, and rare antiquities from indigenous tribes that should not be in this apartment.
Yeah.
They should be returned, or like Indiana Jones says, they should be in a museum.
Yeah. I feel like it was they really leaned in on those cutaways of those statues. It was like, this is a woman of achievement and class and means.
Yes.
You know, and she's a Bond girl. Like this is the classiest woman you're ever going to see in a slasher movie, and she has the trophies to prove it.
She's a woman of refined taste.
Yes.
Her name is Jennifer. She's, as you said, played by a former Bond girl. She, at that time, I think it was just about to be the current Mrs. Ringo star, Barbara Bach.
Score.
She is incredibly good looking, and she is also sick of Tony's shit.
Wait, who wouldn't be?
Yeah. Tony, we've talked a lot about useless cops, but we may have found one of the most useless boyfriends we've ever come across in this motion in any of the films we've ever covered. He's a former or soon to be former NFL player with a knee injury, probably from hauling around that chip on his shoulder.
Hey.
Tony and Jennifer's apartment is in Westwood, California. That's near UCLA. It's near the Aero Theater, which we've covered on the show in both 10 to Midnight and Sleepwalkers. And it was also the former home of the National. That was the theater that was heavily featured in the 1974 promotional documentary for The Exorcist, in which we get to watch a lot of audience members faint in the lobby.
Love it. Love it.
It is not there anymore. I believe it is now just another strip mall. But that was a hell of a fucking motion picture palace once upon a time. I believe I saw Grease there. So there's that. It's on the other side of town, so didn't see it a lot. But we're not going to dwell about Southern California locations. Let's head up the coast to Central California, up above Santa Barbara, because we are going to go to Solvang. For all your pancake, pea soup, and wine-related needs, visit Solvang.
I do like that Jennifer is a reporter.
Mm-hmm.
She is very, very intent on getting there in time to cover a story that, for how important she makes it sound, it's maybe about, political corruption or perhaps a serial killer in town. No, yes. She's there to cover the parade.
Yeah.
Yes.
But think about that. Like every fluff package you see on the news that runs about 90 seconds or less, that was someone's pain in the ass job for the day.
Right.
And you know, maybe this is some sort of commentary on the independent filmmaker, behind the film. Like he's just in the trenches trying to do the best job he can. Just like Jennifer, any job worth doing is worth doing well. Right.
Yeah.
So even if you're covering the shitty parade in Solvang, you got to take it seriously. Otherwise you do not get a shelf full of Emmys.
That's right. Or at least a shelf with an Emmy.
With an Emmy, yeah.
Purports to have. Yeah.
What if it was his Emmy?
As well as he purports to have a Heisman trophy that looks like the Michelin Man. I'm not sure that's how the Heisman really looks. To my mind, I believe the Heisman is brass looking, not silver, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not a sports expert. Otherwise, I would have a fucking sports show.
Yeah, I didn't know this was a sports show. I'm not prepared to discuss this.
This is for people who wheezed and could not play outside after 4 p.m.
Yeah.
So they go after, scouting a couple of locations. They go to their hotel. Turns out the business offices fucked them over. They don't have reservations. And every hotel in town is booked up for German Fest. So what are you going to do? Both Jennifer and Karen and Vicky, and I'm not sure what Vicky's job is. Is she the sound person? I don't know what her job within this little camera crew is, but she doesn't do any of it because it turns out she's sick. I seem to think it was because that she was pregnant. Turns out another member of this crew is pregnant. We'll talk about that later. So this threesome starts searching for a place to stay. Why they blow past Welton is beyond me, but they go all the way up the 101 towards Los Alamos. And the weird thing is they end up at the 1880 Union. And you're saying to yourself, I don't know what the fuck that is.
I don't.
Well, it's a little music video with Michael Jackson and Paul McCartney. Does that interest you?
Wow.
Perhaps?
Okay.
Would you like to say in that music video that both of them are competing to romance Michael's sister?
What?
Coincidence? I think not.
So you've got some legit geographical context and history for this movie.
I weirdly enough, I do.
Does it make sense? Like, is where they drove to from Solvang, is this all legit?
Yes, you can. It's certainly a more populated area than it used to be because now all of this is the Central Coast wine hub of California. So all these places are built out. The 1880 Union is a real place. You can have your wedding there now. Kurt Russell launched a wine from there. Is there anything more kill by kill than Kurt Russell launching wine? I don't think so. But it's still there. The town's a lot more built out. But yeah, if you head up the 101 from there, you're going to run into Los Alamos. It's not the first place you would go, but we've had movies that have worse geography problems. I'm looking at you, 10 to midnight.
I'm excited to go to Solvang, by the way. I just want to say this movie has made it a lifelong itch for me. And I hope it's still like that.
It's a beautiful town. It's so much. Listen, when you go, I'll let you know what local pancake house to go to instead of the one in town.
Okay.
All the tourists go to that pancake place.
Oh, yeah,
I know the good one.
Give me the real. Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
But luckily they find the 1880 Union, which is being masked as a different type of hotel here. And we run into Ernest Keller, played by the one, the only Sidney Lassick. Now, the last time we talked about Sidney on this show, he was getting dosed by a pot cheese pizza in Skatetown, USA.
Yeah, and he was in Carrie.
Yes.
And pretty much every other movie in the 1970s, always playing the same kind of character, this sort of weaselly, whiny character.
He's a shady pet store owner in Alligator.
Yeah.
Yes.
A little stay tuned for the home audience on Alligator. You're going to want to keep that in mind.
Hey.
A nice piece of information that we get in the background here is that Ernest is running a museum of his old father's hotel. The museum is open from Wednesday through Sunday, 1 to 4 p.m. How do I get these fucking hours?
I was going to say, that's like post office hours.
It's even better than post office hours. It's unbelievable. Like I got to get in on this motel hotel museum racket.
Well, if you kill the boss, you can make your own hours.
Right. It's a family gig, and he's killing off family left and right. And I know the audience is wondering, and I'm here to just calm you down. If you were hoping against hope that does Barbara Bach have a butt? Don't worry. Danny Steinman will make sure that he films it from every angle, close up, far away, from the side. You know that butt by the end of this movie.
It is the male gaze, isn't it?
I mean, Steinman's idea of how women operate is really, really odd. It doesn't so much happen here, but in his next two movies, he becomes under the delusion that when a woman is alone, and runs into a mirror, she has to take off as many clothes as she has on in order just to see what she's doing. Like, what's going on under the hood there?
Just talking to themselves the whole time.
Right. Just yippity yapping about, are those boobs? What is my butt doing today? You see it all, but not so much in this movie. He's evolving his voice. But once Jennifer, lays down what the situation is, Ernest is there to help. And I think he's doing it with a phone that's not plugged in. And Jennifer just doesn't pick up on it.
Certainly.
I mean, far be it from me to look for realism in the unseen, because it's not really there to be found. But it does give the impression that phone is not plugged in and has not worked for 35 years is what I'm going to venture.
Yeah, he's about a minute from doing that whole, hold on, I'm going to go check something downstairs. That kind of like walk where you pretend you're going downstairs.
Yeah. Don't worry. He has a solution for what their inability to find a motel room. Why don't you just come to my place? Meet my wife, Virginia. Now, when they get there, you might recognize this place because it was also seen in two major horror films, Amityville, The Evil Escapes.
What?
And How to Make an American Quilt.
Really?
Wait, is Evil Escape, is that the one with the lamp?
That's the lamp.
No,
Yeah.
Really? I've seen that movie like 3 times. How did I not recognize that house?
I think it does not look as pearly white as it does there, but it does look as pearly white in How to Make an American Quilt. I will put it that way.
Steinman somehow accentuated the house's butt.
You should see the rack on that house. And by rack, I mean closet. Ernest, while he's putting on this facade to bring these 3 outsiders into his home, which is a very delicate ecosystem. So I'm not sure what Ernest's motivation is other than hoping to catch one of them in the bathroom, I guess. But he is sweating like he's being cross-examined by Perry Mason.
Oh my God. He's just like Ted Stryker landed that plane.
I mean, at certain points, sweat just squirts out of various pores because the pressure built up underneath from him lying on top of lie on top of lie. He's not great at it, but for whatever reason, because they're all too tired or they just are welcoming the respite from driving along the 101. They're like, fine, we'll take it. So Jennifer and Karen take off back to Solvang to film the piece while Vicky stays behind to take a bath. A known cure for people who are feeling ill.
Yeah, speaking of moisture, we also see that Virginia cannot stop crying.
Yes.
She is constantly on the verge of tears throughout this entire movie. And when she isn't on the verge of tears, she is actively weeping.
Yeah.
Yes. She's letting the waterworks flow. She's on the edge, but no one else in the movie seems to view it as odd or off-putting. They're just like, that's Virginia, and walks away. So whenever she's been suffering from all this time up till this point in the movie, no one seems to be paying it any sort of mind.
It works.
I wouldn't say Ernest is a criminal mastermind. It's just like no one else is fucking observant.
Yeah. Well, very early on, they try to establish him as threatening to her. When he's like, you wouldn't want me to become cross, would you? And you're like, who on the other end of that phone is threatened by Sidney Lassick? And when you see her, you go, oh, it's a broken woman.
Okay.
She's completely shattered.
Who's not allowed to talk to other human beings.
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting it now. And so, as you might imagine, once a woman in a Danny Steinman movie is alone, takes off all her clothes. Ernest, being the guy that he is, decides, I'm going to take some blankets upstairs and peep on her through a hole in the keyhole. And like most keyholes, this one can pan across where the bathroom is and lower the frame So you're always following the naked girl, no matter where she goes, like keyframes do. Again, we do not come to the unseen for realism. But it's just science. That's the way they operate. And you think, oh, she's going to get it hurt. She doesn't. Meanwhile, in the barn, that's right, a Danny Steinman movie with a barn in it. I know that's also shocking everyone. Virginia goes in to make some lunch. And I had the closed captions on. And once you get inside the barn, you start to hear clucking from the chickens. The closed caption read, chickens ducking.
Ducking. That autocorrect will get you every time.
Yep.
This is a barn of doom, and somebody ends up dead. 2 chickens. And, if you were going to say, but we don't see a headless chicken, do you? Yeah, you see a headless chicken.
Yeah, in slow motion.
The only way to see it, the grandeur.
Danny doesn't want you to miss it.
Listen, he saw, Lawrence of Arabia. He knows how to evoke the cinematic nature of the circle of life here, and he's going to give it.
He's like, this is my apocalypse now moment.
And she's chopping that chicken's head off. Maybe those chickens were ducking. She goes to the bar. It's just they start ducking.
It's like, oh shit, sir.
Meanwhile, up in the second floor of the house, Vicky is sleeping with her hands covering her collarbones for some reason and is woken up by something we can't see, something unseen, perhaps.
Hey.
And then we get about 2 minutes of her struggling to survive something we can't see. She tries to make it outside the door. That doesn't happen. She tries to make it out the window. And then finally, and I say finally as if this was the natural way any movie would have gone, she is dragged to an open air vent and pulled down inside until the point their struggle reaches an apex, and the top of the grate, I think, maybe breaks her neck, maybe?
Yeah, I got the impression it just fell on her head or something.
It seems to be a neck or head injury. We don't see it happen. We just see the end result, but she's dead. Sorry. If she was your favorite character, this movie is not going to feature her very much in an alive state from this moment on. Meanwhile, Virginia prepares 2 boiled chickens and delivers them to a locked basement. I doubt this is a clue, so let's just move on. Tony, the aforementioned Tony, shows up in Solvang. He's a real creeper. If I could boil down his argument to get Jennifer back, it might be, and tell me if you've heard this before, Gina, have you considered my penis?
What an angle. I've never seen that before.
It works every single time. And to back it up, am I to infer by the last names in this movie that Jennifer and the other Karen are sisters?
Yeah, I assume that, and her sister can't push her back towards this toxic relationship fast enough.
Who amongst us doesn't want to bang the second banana from the Fall Guy? But and he's hunkalicious, I guess, for 1980. I mean, this is as good as it kind of gets. But when he arrives, Jennifer looks at him and says, quote, "Beat up on any more women today."
Yeah, that is never mentioned again.
No.
Which to me, that would be whatever else is going on in their relationship. That seems to be, everything else should be taking second, place over that.
Yeah, because there's not a lot of great connotations. There's several bad connotations to beat up on any more women today. I guess it's either that he's been consistently mean to her is the most generous reading, or they're in a physically abusive relationship is the worst. I want to say he's just been mad and been lashing out at her, but I also don't want to excuse abuse, because that's, I think, what Karen's kind of doing when she's like, you got to get back with this guy. Come on. How are you going to get any better than this?
Yeah, oh yeah, her sister does not want to hear a single bad thing about this guy.
So, and if you're wondering, all three women are like drop dead fucking gorgeous. It is, again, another real big problem in Danny Steinman land. Like he's always picking out uggos. These women are drop dead gorgeous. Karen, who's the blonde sister and camera person, heads back to the Keller house. Meanwhile, Ernest is back at the hotel museum, and it's time for a little thing we like to call backstory by audio only flashback.
The last scene with Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker.
Yes, we. This was a time like this. This is when this existed. But I think, to speak to what you were saying earlier, Phil, whether they meant to be a direct homage to Psycho, or Psycho was so pervasive that it just lived in the back of everyone's mind rent free. And when they had the opportunity to make a horror movie, it just crept in the cracks and crevices of their script. It's very Psycho forward.
Yeah, but it doesn't feel like theft. It doesn't feel like pastiche or even cliche. It coming when it does in the movie, it sort of is surprising. You know what I mean? Because
he's weird. You just don't know what kind of weird he is.
Yeah, we're just doing that. There's a trend lately now where a lot of protagonists who are not quote unquote mentally ill will hallucinate in horror movies. It's just a thing that we've started doing now, where you're like, oh yeah, this is your protagonist in your horror film, and she's going to hallucinate this scene. And it just, I don't know, like I went through a week where I think I saw 5 movies where the protagonist was hallucinating something. And it's a weird thing that's gotten normal, but this movie is very naturalistic up to this point. And now suddenly he's having this scene with himself, as Sidney Lassick, career character actor who's got this spotlight, is not going to waste it. And he's just going for it.
The eyes are wigging out like they're like, it's a pneumatic and a Disneyland figurine, and there's an electrical problem. It's just
he's like going to be
he's drinking
animatronic.
He's sweating.
Yeah,
he's playing against a cat, and we get this very long story, which he's doing a one-sided monologue, but we're also hearing his father, and through a time tunnel, and we get this scene in which we learn that Ernest has made some mistakes in life, starting with actively having sexual relations with his sister, quite possibly against her will, also impregnating her. She eventually tells Dad. He seems to take it well initially, but only because I think he's been looking forward to the punishment for that particular crime, which they allude to, and I'm assuming is castration.
Right.
And of course, we're delivered this information while looking at a cat curling up in the lap of a mummified corpse.
Right. And it's worth pointing out that the voice, that guy didn't sort of get to look at the dailies. He's sort of doing like a Disney villain shopkeeper kind of voice.
Yeah.
That is not organic to anything else happening in this film.
Right. He's the kind of person who, withholds gruel from, young orphans, sort of.
Yeah, he's almost Dickensian, but in a way, if this is Ernest's memory of his dad, he's the most unreliable of narrators. So maybe that's just how he remembers his dad's voice.
There's also his dad's supposed actions, which are to pull down your pants. We're going to take care of this problem right away.
Yeah.
They end up in an audio-only scuffle, and then it is revealed that the mummified corpse has a dagger in its throat. And I guess the way he covered up this crime was, no one can go in this room anymore.
Yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and lock this. Which is a thing.
It's the perfect crime, baby.
It's a thing.
No one can figure it out. You know why? Because the police are only open Monday and Tuesday.
Never come to this house ever.
If no one's looking, like think about it. Buffalo Bill had the old woman who lived in that house soaking in that bathtub, slowly turning to liquid over the years, and that seemed to work out fine.
And it really did.
Yeah.
Honestly, that's very, very true. I guess the only other question I have from this, which is very pertinent to us being in Oscar season right now, is, was Daddy Keller actually Bronco Henry? There's no wrong answers, but there is one right answer, and we're not sure which one it is.
Wait, there's no wrong answers, but there's only one right answer?
I didn't make the rules, Gina. Okay, that's the way it works here. Okay,
well,
freedom of speech. Allow me to talk.
There's I believe, a framed photo of the dad when she first comes in, and he's going to use the fake phone to fake call for help. And it looks like one of those portraits that, like, if you step sideways, it turns into a monster kind of thing. You know, those lenticular
something from the
haunted mansion. Yes,
sure.
It looks very much like that. He's got a lot of grease paint happening. But I mean, yeah, maybe
it's like they cut back. It's like turned into Pennywise or something.
Yeah.
There's snakes growing out of her head. Yeah, it all makes perfect sense. So in the midst of this, Virginia finds Vicky's body, and as you can imagine, she takes it great. This is exactly how she wanted her afternoon to go.
Spine of steel with this woman.
She crumples into a bathtub, but when she's crumpled in the bathroom, wouldn't you know it, Karen comes home. And rather than warn Karen about any sort of danger, she's like, well, I can't do that. So Karen is, you would assume, going to find her friend's head sticking out of this HVAC, this decorated HVAC vent, but no. She just manages to miss it and heads down to a very stained kitchen. The kitchen is in disrepair in this home. She fumbles for an apple.
In this bowl full of loose cherries.
We all have a bowl full of loose cherries. Listen, this is the thing about California. We're America's, fruit and vegetable basket. This is what we offer the world. And when you're here, well, you get to partake as much as you want. So, yeah, sometimes you have a bowl of loose cherries hanging around, unrefrigerated. And of course, as she's picking these cherries now up off the floor, a bit of her scarf falls into another vent, this time on the first floor. And lo and behold, something takes a hold of both sides of that scarf. And we have a battle of capes versus plane engine going on here, where she is slowly, and I do mean slowly, pulled down, then given. It's like how Quint brings the shark from Jaws in a little bit. He's working on her. The way they tell you to bring in a marlin slowly, so you work them out so they don't struggle as much, I guess. I don't know. I've never been commercial fishing. And at a certain point, whatever's in the vent, the unseen, as it were, says, I'm sick of this, and just yanks and crushes her face into this grate.
Yep.
Doesn't fully do the job. She recovers a little bit, but the unseen is just working that marlin, and he yanks down again, and I think she's donezo from that moment on.
Yeah, it's pretty gnarly.
A beautiful face, torn asunder. And so the unseen 2, camera crew 0 at this point.
Just taking out that entire local news scene.
And best not to think too deeply on Danny Steinman mutilating beautiful women, casting them for specific facial, head, and neck trauma. There's a lot going on there, but we don't need to get into it.
No, I mean, listen, there's nothing Freudian about Steinman's over. That's for sure. Meanwhile, back in Solvang, we got Tony, who's wistfully watching 12-year-olds play football, wishing he could crush them all. Question for the group: what role? What was he? A quarterback? Was he a tailback? Do we have any idea what position he played in football?
Oh, I don't know.
No,
I know I always assumed he was kind of a quarterback, but the one picture they have in their apartment is him kind of like rushing. So I'm wondering if he was kind of like a tailback or. I don't fucking know.
We just said this is not a sports show.
I stopped watching the NFL 8 years ago because I was sick of watching people entertain me with brain injuries, and I haven't really looked back. So a lot of that information has left my brain at this point.
Yeah, no, I have no idea.
Meanwhile, Ernest is pretty chipper for a dude with 2 dead bodies in his house. And he's, just quizzing Virginia as you do with the clips from when you dry laundry outside hanging off his face. And she's kind of like, at a certain point, like, we have a problem, and that problem is a bunch of dead bodies in our house. And he takes it really well.
Yeah, Hoops Among Us hasn't, come home, hi, honey, I'm home. Hey, there's a couple corpses in here.
One of my favorite moments in all of the background of them in Solvang is when Tony's walking amongst the populace and we see one guy in a bikini top. Just one guy.
Just one.
Just one. You got to love background players, baby. So we kind of cut between, two women who are emotionally on the edge and the two guys in their life who just won't fucking listen to them. In fact, if you were to put anything underneath this movie as the unseen : like the Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Bandits, it would be the unseen. Shut up and listen to a woman for once. And yet, compared to Simon's other two movies, this might have been penned by Erica Jong, for Christ's sake. It's just the amount of slasher adjacent horror flicks that revolve around two different women and their right to choose is just not a booming genre we really think about. And yet we 2 in a row here, Gita, with He Knows You're Alone and The Unseen. Like, they're actually taking on topics of the time, and everyone goes like, oh, get your politics out of my horror. Like, fucking what? You're telling me Danny Steinman can talk about this, but we can't now? Fuck off. Jesus Christ. Of course, I'm saying fuck off to this general nonsense dipshit on Twitter, whom I do not know and do not follow. But I'm sure everyone has seen whoever that man is, and it's undoubtedly a man.
Yes.
When Jennifer is having her conversation with Tony, she's speaking true facts here. She is the person in this couple with an active career, and he's got terrible form when it comes to working out with his knee. He's taking his butt all the way off the bench.
Oh my God. The way he looked kind of arching his back. I was like, that's not how you do that.
No, not with a knee injury. Oh my God. This is not the way you exercise a wounded knee. And we'll learn why that's so vital later on. But ultimately, what it comes down to is they were kind of inching towards a marriage. Then she gets pregnant, but she has decided, no, it is not the right time in our relationship to have a child. And it's my body, my choice, and I'm going to take care of this. And he is very pissed off about it. And that is a component in this very sleazy motion picture.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, Virginia's life is very harrowing. She is in a situation where she is trapped in a house in an incestuous relationship with her brother. She cannot get out of it. She's given, spoiler alert for the third act of this movie, has given birth to the unseen, and she can't talk to anybody about this. And that's before we learn what the unseen is.
Yeah, they don't really go too much into what the rest of the town, in fact, they don't go into it all. Like, he has neither of them have any interaction with anybody else from the town. It's just strictly, which is interesting because he runs a museum. So
yes.
You would think that he would have some interaction with the people, and that there'd be rumors, or there'd be a crazy Ralph scene. It would be like, oh, don't go there. There's weird things happening up there, or something like that. But nothing. They're in complete isolation.
It's weird because it's kind of being made at the same time as these other movies that will, while it doesn't light the fuse of the slasher boom like Halloween does, but the aftermath are things like Friday the 13th and The Unseen and He Knows You're Alone. Like, everyone's trying to catch up to Halloween at that point. And so you have some crossover that's just unintentional, like a Friday the 13th third act rainstorm with the exact same library thunder noise. That's one of those things. Obviously, they weren't borrowing because they're being made at the same time. It's just kismet. It's like everyone's aiming for the same target, and so they kind of occupy some of the same space.
Who made it to theaters first?
That is a good question. Now, obviously, Friday the 13th came out in June. So The Unseen, 1980. This is something I just should have put
That's
in my notes.
fine. I've already looked. September 12th, apparently.
Yeah.
So later that summer.
Hot on the heels. And yeah, they're pretty much filming at the same time. It's just that I think this movie's post-production was so tumultuous with Steinman walking off the film. That's probably its bigger delay. Otherwise, this probably would have been a July or August. I don't know. Release dates were weird. They just put out movies back then. They're just like, this can live forever. Just put it in theaters and it'll limp along for a year. Good news. The Kellers have a creepy doll collection, if you were worried.
Of course they do. Of course they do.
And I'm always amazed when I see a giant California basement. California, not a state known for a lot of basements. Usually you're on a concrete slab. But here, a gigantic basement, and you're going, well, why would I see that? A basement hasn't been a big part of this movie. Well, it sure as shit is now, because Ernest lures Jennifer down to the bottom so that he kind of pulls a Buffalo Bill, speaking of which, again, with the help me do this. And he's trying to connect these giant I don't know what the fuck that is. She's holding on to a rope. He said, this screw is too big. And then he goes upstairs, locks the door, puts on a record and goes, done and done. All my problems are over. Why? Because she is going to run into the unseen down there. And the unseen just so happens to be Stephen First in crazy man baby chunk makeup.
Not chunk, sloth.
Sloth. I'm sorry.
I always mix those up too.
Aren't they this chunk and sloth? Sloth and chunk. They're practically Tom and Jerry.
Two sides of the same
which?
coin.
Yeah, the phrase his large son was coined because of Junior and
his large adult son. Yes,
he has large adult son.
This might be large adult son prime, really, when you think about it.
And again, Phil, to refer back to your article, you mentioned that you're pretty sure that Edgar Wright had seen this because of Nick Frost's appearance in the fake trailer Don't.
Right.
Yeah.
And I 100% agree with you. That has to be where he got this from. Except
Mr. Wright replied to me on Twitter assuring me he had not seen The Unseen. And he was moved to write this to me because he did on that day watch The Unseen, apparently. And he couldn't believe the similarities, but he had not seen it until after I'd written that.
That's wild. Okay.
I mean,
there's other
traveling through the zeitgeist.
What was it? The baby, was another.
Yeah.
There were.
Oh, sure.
There are man children in horror, I guess.
Yeah. Yes.
I believe him, but because he seemed fairly gobsmacked on the ass end of just watching The Unseen. He was like, wow. He couldn't. It's like when you saw it.
Yeah. No, you can hear about it. It's like riding a bike. I've done this metaphor before. You can read about riding a bike. You can watch other people riding a bike, but until you're up on that bike with your feet on the pedals and trying to propel forward while balancing, you don't know how to ride a fucking bike. You can hear about The Unseen. You can listen to us talk about it, but then you have to watch it and reckon with what you see with your own eyeballs.
Yes. There are a handful of movies like that, and they're gifts, aren't they?
Yes.
I mean,
it's stuff that's so fucking outrageous you can't believe that they really exist. And for a portion of this third act, it's just Barbara Bach just like moving around, trying to find light bulbs that work. And she's just yelling through grates in rainstorms. And then finally she passes by a trash pile and it starts to move. And you're like, what the fuck's in that trash pile? Movie's flounder emerges with a bald cap on and half an eyelid closed.
And a very large diaper.
a well-used diaper.
Yeah, that diaper has not been changed in a minute. He's oh boy.
I have to go back to my question that I often ask when we cover movies is imagine how that must have smelled.
How did she, again, we're in that same weird situation here.
How did she not smell this?
Jason Voorhees, where you're like, how the fuck do you not smell that? Because how can that sneak up on you? That stink has got to be emanating like the waves of filth, and Peanuts, when that dirty peanut arrives everywhere he goes. I can't remember which peanut is dirty. Anyways.
Pigpen.
Sure. I'll take your word for it.
Dirty peanut.
I didn't know what the fuck you were talking about.
That's his name now. That dirty peanut.
Dirty.
Please, someone make some art where it's Stephen First in his dirty diaper with stink lines coming off of him underneath the dirty peanut. Again, why so far I was texting with Gina before we started. We already have like 4 full t-shirt ideas for this movie and none for Final Destination. It's just, there's something about this movie that it just inspires, whether you've seen it or not. Anyways, Barbara Bach sees what she's dealing with, immediately breaks her ankle, and then makes her way to what appears to be an exit, but it's leading to one of those 2 barn door exits from a basement. And she's trying to get out. And of course, she gets soaked, because why not add a wet woman to the situation?
I mean, she's not wearing a t-shirt. She is like fully clothed.
She is fully clothed, but she is also fully fucking wet now for the last 20 minutes of this movie. That is when she's not rolling around in dirt. Barbara Bach is earning a paycheck here.
Yeah, she's really woken up at this point. Like for the first maybe like 45 minutes of the movie, she's not so great. But once she gets in that basement, she's full steam ahead. She's finally engaged with the material.
Apparently, the big problem Steinman had with her in this was that he wanted someone to scream. And I think it's almost more effective that she can't fully scream. She has reached that point where her sanity has broken. And this is where it kind of connects with another movie that is in the background here that will come out only 1 year later. And that is Tobe Hooper's The Funhouse. This movie and The Funhouse have a weird structural sense, a weird vibe thing where it's a lot of dread. It doesn't move fast. There's not a high body count, but then it reaches the end and your final girl, as it were, is pushed to the point where her mind goes broke. It just snaps in two, and you're watching someone who's not really rationally thinking anymore. They're scared out of their fucking mind. And that's, I think this is to say that it's like, I think Tobe Hooper is one of the greatest movie makers, particularly for his ability to do that. You want me to tell you why I know that he directed Poltergeist?
Yeah.
Because at the end of that movie, he has a woman whose sanity breaks on screen. Mm-hmm. And I'll be honest with you, he is the guy who is able to do that consistently over and over again. Film people whose minds have snapped by what they have witnessed with their own eyes. That is a power, that is a skill as unique as anything that Spielberg has. He has that. And you see it in Poltergeist. And here, this is as close to I've seen a contemporary manage to do that. Like he kind of pulls off a little Texas Chainsaw Massacre here.
It's a great point about Tobe Hooper. First of all, I haven't heard anybody illustrate that. And I think you're really onto something there. That's a nice smoking gun for Poltergeist, for all the Poltergeist conspiracy theorists, first of all.
Yeah, I mean, listen, like Spielberg directed a lot of second unit stuff on that. He wasn't supposed to, he was trying to help out. He wanted to direct it, but like he hired Hooper again and again after that. It's not like he was like, oh, this guy doesn't know what he's fucking doing. He absolutely knew what he was doing. But there's all of Spielberg's guys on that movie because they've just finished E.T. and that's in post, and like they have to do something, so they all move over to Poltergeist. It makes me steam. It makes me steam.
Interesting. No, this is great. This is a great point. And you're right. That energy's in there. But if I can jump in for 1 second, because when you said Funhouse, you made me think of something else. And you certainly have a lot of your homework and your research there, so maybe you can shed some light on this. But so you've got Leatherface in '74, a very clearly developmentally disabled killer, right? Yeah. For Halloween, he's evil. That's what's wrong with him. He's evil.
Sure.
But now, when we get into 1980, with Funhouse with The Unseen with Jason Voorhees. Suddenly we're back to what we would have called the R word back in the day. Why did we become so fixated on mentally handicapped killers in this very short period of time?
You know, I don't know why that is such a trope, and it weirdly like parallels with the revenge whodunit half of the slashervilles. You know, your prom nights, your terror trains, your our vaunted happy birthday party, in which these singular incidents break people and then they have to kill. The other half are just are just entities that by hook or by crook, by circumstance, are put into a place where their only outlet is violence. And I think there is an inability coming out of the 70s for people to understand what is taking hold in the society where killing has become a little bit more wholesale. My guess is there's a lot of Vietnam trauma wrapped up in this, and a lot of disbelief at what has quote unquote become of society is also there. And just ableism, just straight up fucking ableism.
Yeah. If I could give a somewhat more simplified answer to that,
Sure.
I think it's kind of terrifying, the idea for a lot of people of a strong, very strong person having the mind of a child, and not understanding how to quote unquote play properly, or it sort of goes back to Of Mice and Men, where he's where I think it's Lenny is the mentally challenged character,
right?
And he's playing with an animal, but he accidentally kills it, and that's tragic, but also kind of horrifying at the same time. And there's this need. Well, he needs to be made to understand what he did was wrong, but at the same time, it's like, well, how can we make him understand that he has the mind of a 6-year-old? And you just sort of apply that to a slasher movie. It's I'm terrified, but also this is kind of repulsive, but also particularly here it's played as very tragic, where he was just this product of this unholy union. You sort of kept away from society, treated like a monster, and it's not his fault. He didn't do anything, and I think that you get the idea that he didn't mean to hurt these women.
Right, he's playing.
He's trying to get their attention. He's trying to play with her. There's like the scene where he's trying to give her this basically threadbare teddy bear. He keeps like shoving it at her, and she's but he keeps doing it harder and harder and harder. But he's not trying to hurt her. He's like, hey, I want you to play with this. Why aren't you playing with it? And if you've ever spent time around a small child, they don't know how to take no for an answer.
Right.
And it's cute when a little kid is kind of pushing something at you. Not so much cute when it's an adult who has got about 9 inches and about good 100 pounds over you.
Yeah. But at the same time, something interesting is happening in this ending, because he very quickly, and again, who knew that Danny Steinman had this in him, but your threat becomes a sympathetic character while the quirky guy is revealed to be the actual antagonist. That's a weird pivot, and that's probably not that easy to pull off, I would think.
Yeah. This is all a tightrope act that is done so wildly that like a person like hooks their leg around the tightrope and swings around, 360 degrees. Like that should not be possible.
Yeah.
And yet it does it. It's got this weird dichotomy. Like Gina, like you were saying, there's this moment where Junior is alternatively trying to swallow Jennifer's hair and wear it on his head to make her laugh.
Yeah, he's playing with her. He's fooling around.
It is fucking wild. And it's just the performance that you're getting from Stephen First. Like, again, he is earning a paycheck here. It's not so much a cat and mouse situation between him and Jennifer. It's more of a disco duck. It's just a one long stretch of uncomfortable mouth noises uttered over and over and over again. Meanwhile, Sidney Lassick, a.k.a. Rick Dees, is upstairs just trying to get it on with his sister. And you're like, what movie am I watching? Who am I rooting for? Who am I rooting against? And it just becomes this extended tension experiment where you're not sure who the exact threat is. And bringing it back to another film comparison, Phil, that you're intimately tied to, and that is the James Bond franchise. Because we have a main villain who really is Sidney Lassick's Ernest. And Junior is our physical villain.
He's the henchman, so to speak.
Yes, he's not necessarily Goldfinger. He's a guy who just happens to be very large and has a sharp metal ring in his hat that he can take off the heads of statues.
He's more like Jaws from Moonraker, where he's a threat and then he's an ally. Because he's going to,
and he falls in love with a girl with braces because that all makes sense.
She doesn't have braces. We're not going to get into the Mandela effect thing, are we? Dolly does not have braces in Moonraker. Dolly does not have braces in Moonraker. All right. All right. Okay. But yeah, I mean, I don't know.
I love how serious you got there because it means so much to you. I mean, this is I think this is legitimately good about
Great.
So after a while, Ernest just can't take it. He's got to come downstairs and see what's happening. Yeah. And so he kind of inserts himself in between Jennifer and Junior. And Junior's kind of like immediately starts to kind of cower. And then when he sees that Ernest kind of take off his belt and he's going to choke Jennifer, then he's like, I need to spring into action. And they have a tussle. And they're kind of going at it, Junior, good old Uncle Dad, who will win in this trash pile. And then let's bring it back to Friday the 13th, another movie that has a long extended battle between two people who cannot fight. And we have another one here. The only thing I can compare it to, again, is Bela Lugosi versus the octopus and Bride of the Monster. It seems like one person is doing all the fighting and the other person's like, I've got a bad back. But at the end of it, we get some faux bites, mild tussles, a couple random slaps, one particularly soft headbutt. And then Ernest starts picking up balsa wood boards and breaking them over Junior. And at first it's all fun and games. And then Ernest finds one with a nail in it and takes it to Junior's head, and pour one out for Junior because he's never going to recover from this.
Yeah. And you feel for him.
Yeah. At that point, it's like, oh, this is sad. Poor Junior. He didn't ask.
None of the circumstances is something he signed up for.
He literally didn't ask to be born.
No, literally. None of us necessarily did, but he really didn't ask to be treated like this after the fucking fact. That is for goddamn sure. And Stephen First, maximum effort in this third act of the movie. He is making an impression. 100%.
Yeah.
And then, I cannot believe we are going to, I don't want to talk about this movie longer than the movie actually exists. Fair. And yet here we are. But Jennifer crawls out of the basement because she's broken her ankle. She makes it to the Barn of Doom. Another Barn of Doom. Then Ernest grabs a hatchet. I don't know why he doesn't go in for the kill. He's not fast about these things. He's old fashioned, but he sort of misses his opportunity to hatchet her to death. She makes it outside. And wouldn't you know it, everybody, Hope has arrived. Why, yes, it's Tony. I thought this was going to be good. No, Tony's arrived. And that's right. The guy accused of beating up on women is here to save the day in slow motion, literal slow motion.
If only his knee doesn't give out.
He's here. Oh, I really hope so. And it's not like they're telegraphing anything, directly giving a close up of the knee as he runs in the rain.
Meanwhile, on his knee.
Fucking snaps like a chicken bone.
Just blows right the hell out.
I mean, I'm surprised he didn't have blood spray come out of it. The noise this fucking thing makes when it snaps.
It's like somebody tearing a leg off a chicken.
just large cracks. Like the snap of it sends off a concussive wave throughout the rain. And he goes down for the count. You're like, meanwhile, Barbara Bach is literally crawling through the mud, and Ernest is slipping in the mud. And you think, oh boy, these two are really going to get it. When Ernest takes a full-on shotgun shot to the chest. Who saved the day? It was Virginia. Virginia has had enough of this shit. And she kills Ernest and walks back into the house, down into the basement, cradles Stephen first. And then, lo and behold, the best after movie credit that we've ever seen on this podcast appears. And I'm going to read it word for word in case you haven't seen the movie. It says, in order, Stephen First was, quote, junior, unquote, Keller, captions, the unseen.
Yeah.
R.I.P.
I don't think there's any better after movie credit we've ever covered on the movie.
I just want that on a shirt.
just those words.
That
I don't even need
font.
the picture associated with it. It just doesn't get any better than that.
I mean, that's better than, beginning credit introducing Stephen First as Junior, the unseen.
Yeah, enough with your fucking "and with Stephen First." Like, no. This is better. This is better. It's all better. This is the best Danny Steinman movie. I don't want to hear anyone say anything different. Any final thoughts about the unseen?
I mean, the subject matter is definitely going to scare people away, and that's understandable. But I mean, I think that it's a very interesting and surprisingly, I don't want to say sensitively handled because it's not, but I think the turn into making it tragic rather than exploitative was interesting. If you want a really depressing double feature that you might want to take a very long shower afterward, I would pair this with the X-Files episode Home. The one that the legendarily horrifying episode that did not air for about another 15 years after it aired for the first time. Somewhat similar themes of incest and family so horrifically inbred that they had become literal monsters.
Right.
But I think that if you want a genuine, they couldn't make this anymore kind of horror movie, this would be a good pick. It's well made. Everybody in it is really giving their all. I mean, you've got this dynamic with Ernest and Virginia where you kind of forget they're actually brother and sister because they have a very classic abusive husband and wife sort of dynamic that kind of adds to the overall luridness and creepiness of it. I found it a very interesting, very watchable movie. Yeah,
I agree with you. Phil, you have the last word.
Well, we talk about, you hear a lot of, Psycho's the precursor to the slasher film, and there's Psycho and Texas Chainsaw, and then there's the slasher era, but there's other weird little incest babies in the basement of cinema that sort of sit in between that, on that timeline. And this is really one of them. And I think, if you have an interest in the idea of slasher films or the history and the sort of I keep saying archaeology, but like to me it's a dig. You go and you find this thing and you go, oh, this is this dinosaur bone that fits in between this and this. And I think it's exciting in that regard because it's a piece of a continuum that not a lot of people know about. It's got slasher elements. It's got more classic Hitchcockian elements. The craft colliding with the sleaze is maybe singular for me. And you're watching just character actors who know that they've got a sandbox that they might never have again. Just take these big swings, and it's so fun for that.
It's a great combination of the high low,
yes,
right? You have the high skill of the performers involved, and they're giving their all, and they're trying to make the best this they can possibly get. And the film's just inherent DNA is incredibly sleazy. It just makes a very interesting film, whereas a lot of people, take swings at this, and as they might be inspired to do, but very few films kind of crack the bat the way this one kind of does. Like, you just have to give it up for what it is. I just find it an incredibly interesting curio. And as the title implies, it's criminally underseen. And while it has been made available, I think the copy that I picked up was out of print, and I just managed to grab the last one that I had. I would love to see this back. I would love to see this available to more people, and those who, are okay with making this kind of journey into it. I think they would get a lot out of it. It's one of a kind, baby. And yet it has subconsciously influenced so much that came after it that it had to be seen by a certain amount of people at some point, because its themes and elements in it erupt as if it is just floating in the zeitgeist, and it just reaches down and people touch it and they don't even know it. It's wild. So before we go, of course, we have to play a little game. It's America's favorite. It's called Choose Your Own Death Venture, and that is where we decide of the deaths portrayed in this movie. If you were forced to die in one of them, which one would you choose and why? And of course, up for bid here, we have pulled into the basement from the second floor and maybe you got a broken neck, or you could be decapitated by a hatchet and boiled for dinner. Yes, I'm counting the kitchens because I'm not counting the chickens because they actually died in this movie. Or you can get stabbed in the throat by your son, or your face is smashed into an air grate via scarf, or you can take a board and nail to the forehead, or you can take a shotgun to the chest. And so, Phil, as our returning guest, I choose you to go first.
I don't like any of those, but but if I gotta go, and I don't have a son, but there's something very Shakespearean about being killed by your own son, and it's something regal about that. I'm going to pick that one.
Okay, Gina, what say you?
Yeah, I don't like any of those either. They're too prolonged. I mean, I think with me, if you were to hit me in the head with a board with a nail in it, I'd probably, my lights would probably go out pretty fast. But just in case, I'm going to go ahead and take that shotgun blast to the chest.
Yeah, that's
quick.
I mean, you have to do a lot of dastardly things before that happened, but it's so much better than being pulled into a grate, which I just, the way I feel about tight spaces, I'm just not getting near any of those. They just really sound bad. But if I were stabbed in the throat by my son, at least I could live in that cool hotel for the rest of my life. And I get to hang out with that cat. I don't have to worry about being allergic to it anymore.
You got a kitty.
I got a kitty friend, right? And all my memories surrounding me, all those great cobwebs. I think that's just the way to go. So that pretty much does it, folks. Our art here is done by Josh Hollis and the music by Revenge Body. Phil, where can people find you? And of course, where can people find the one and only Fangoria magazine so they can put that in their own hands and read what you're doing?
Please keep me employed. Buy my magazine. You can find us at Barnes & Noble, which is awesome now, and usually at a comic shop. But if you got a Barnes & Noble near you, and this episode's dropping late March, so middle of April, our new issue 15, will be on stands in Barnes & Noble and comic stores. Or you can just go to the website, fangoria.com, and subscribe and get exclusive covers and all kinds of other goodies that way.
And I think you've assembled a real just murderer's row over there, not to put this too literally. The people that you bring in and the articles they write, the interviews you get. I think back to the great Hello, Mary Lou Prom Night 2 article that came out last year that just meant so much to me.
Oh, personally. That's good to hear. Yeah, that was a fun one.
I think that's there. There's something like that for everyone. Every single issue. I think it is it's the It's a magazine that I look forward to landing. And it doesn't feel so much like a magazine. It feels like a curated, I don't know. It's great. I love what Fangoria has become because it's so personal and it's so richly written. And I think everyone involved in it is very into making it the best.
That's so gratifying to hear. And I appreciate you saying that.
And if only you could get Gina Radcliffe to write for you. That's what
you got my email. Send those pitches in.
I do have your email. Yeah, I do.
We're going to make this fucking happen because I write for TV, but Gina just writes. Okay, Gina, where can people find you on these here?
I write about movies and television at thespool.net. I will be covering, by the time this goes up, I will have covered some of South by Southwest's online offerings, which is not many. Now that things are back to quote unquote normal, but I'll do the best that I can. And I am on Twitter and Instagram under Gina Does Things.
Do it today. People, check it out. You can find us, on the socials and whatnot. Come over to Patreon. We're talking, we have a bonus for you every single month. This month is a listener's request, and we covered Mosquito, a classic creature feature. And coming up here at the end of March here, we're going to talk about everyone's favorite Halloween, Halloween 6. It's a movie. That's about all I remember about it. I'm sure it'll be fun.
Paul Rudd.
It has Paul Rudd at his squeakiest clean, and he looks like a real baby doll, and we love to see it. I'm sure it'll be great. We're having a lot of fun doing it. Thank you so much for all of your time and attention in this goofy manner. Don't worry, folks. The body count will continue. It's almost April. You know what happens in April? Animal attacks. That's right. It's a tradition now. Animal attacks April. We've got crocodiles. We've got sharks. We got some bats. We got some rats who are led by a bat. It's a whole fucking thing. Fun guests. It's going to be a good time. We're going to have a munch all the way through it. And we're so happy you're a part of it. The body count will continue for myself and for Phil. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye.